Alright, so today's tip I'm going to be, or not today, this month's tip, I was going to be talking about being inspired from life. Um, I find that there's a lot of fiction out there, a lot of webcomics or animation, cartoons, even novels that are based on other novels, other cartoons, other animation. So it's like this incestuous loop where someone writes a vampire story, then all of a sudden vampires are popular, then everybody else wants to write a vampire story, and their source material is fantasy, like it's somebody else's imagination, which there's nothing wrong with that. But when the inspiration becomes inbred, then I feel like that becomes a problem, and it becomes very trope-ish, like it becomes very repetitive and very predictable when everyone is just copying off each other. And so like this is where my boyfriend and I would talk about shonen tropes of shows like Naruto or in Hunter x Hunter and One Piece, and how they all follow this formula because they're all inspired by each other. Like the mangaka are friends, so they are all copying ideas off each other because that's they love that type of genre of writing, and that type of storytelling. So good on them. And sometimes when you're doing this for as a job, you are pressed for a deadline, and so it's hard to be creative when you're pressed for a deadline. So you're just going to reuse ideas that are already popular, already exist. And this is something that my mom really said to me that stuck. She told me, to have essentially to get out, have a life, have an interesting life, so that you can write from life, because your life is original to you. So I'm gonna give you guys a little insight, as thank you for being my highest tier patrons and for your sponsorship. I really appreciate it a lot because I want to be able to share this story with the world, and it's very difficult to sustain myself in the production of it. So back to drawing from life. So Man's relationship with Kevin is drawn from mostly my own relationship with a guy that I met in my last year of university. So he reached out to me through one of the university classes message boards that we were taking, and asked, hey, do you want to meet up and be friends? And at the time, I had a friend who was starting to really get on my nerves because her value in terms of punctuality for friendship is completely different from my values of punctuality, period. So for my friend, she would definitely, show up on time for something important like an interview. But when it came to her friends, she seemed to treat time like it didn't really matter as much. So she would start arriving an hour late, 2 hours late, and I was starting to get really angry with having to wait for her. So when this offer came, like, hey, do you want to be friends? I'm like, sure, I'm open to like more friends. Hopefully, a friend who's actually punctual. And it turns out that he wasn't just interested in me as a friend, because while we were having dinner, he started to feel up my leg, and I got the sense that okay, so he's interested in me as more than a friend. But at the same time, I was still a virgin at the time, like Lucky. I was also in a weird sort of, I still had my fantasy of, I want to get married, and after dating someone for about 4 years, that seems like a good amount of reasonable amount of time. And I would have sex after marriage because that's just what good girls do. But of course, that didn't happen on that date. He got a bit drunk, and we definitely had chemistry. So I gave in at that point and said, okay, let's do it. And it became sort of my friends with benefits relationship. And this is like my interesting experience with love versus lust, and really just figuring out, oh, there's something qualities that I like in terms of chemistry, in terms of friendship, in terms of communication. Like we could talk for hours. That part was great, right? But at the same time, there were other factors that prevented him from being somebody that I could say I want to be in a long-term relationship with this person, or I want to marry or start a family with it. So there were other factors that were like a big no, and so he didn't make certain criteria, and I realized that I had criteria. And so for me, that experience is the conversation that I brought to Man in getting to know what his relationship with Kevin was like and why things didn't work out between the two of them when they clearly did have common interests, right? They had mutual respect for each other, and they had a lot of really hot like sexual chemistry. But at the same time, Man wanted, a stable, like he wanted to be devoted to somebody as like a spouse. He wanted to be devoted to a spouse, and he wanted to have kids and start a family. But Kevin is not interested in that kind of life or that direction, or he even hasn't started thinking about it yet. So what they want is very different, even though they have a lot in common. At the end, Man felt like he was hurting Kevin, and he didn't want to continue, to lead him on in a sense. So he broke things off, and of course Kevin didn't want Man to break things off because things were good, according to him. And while I didn't have the same argument or explosion, you could say, with my friends with benefits person, there was definitely a lot of similarities that I could draw emotional strings from, and I think that helps me to bring out the realism in the writing. So again, all of the conversations that these characters have some thread to a relationship that I had and a conversation that I've had with somebody, and for me, that's what being inspired by life is about. And it definitely adds something to your writing because you can't dream it up. Like that's why I love the expression "truth is sometimes stranger than fiction," and what fiction really is truth in disguise. Like one of my favorite things about learning in English is how when Shakespeare was writing his plays, yes, they're fictional, but oftentimes they were based in facts that happened in that historical period. For example, you can't say anything bad about the king or you chop your head off, and so instead of saying the king, we'll have this fictional king, right? And then it's safe. And I feel like that's what the purpose of fiction is. The purpose of fiction is to protect the identities of people while still being able to convey their truth. So I'm going to attach some of the drawings of their conversations, sneak peek into next month's story, and I hope you'll be able to glean some insight into how those things link together, what I shared with you about my personal experiences and how that comes out in my writing. So thanks for watching, and if you have any other suggestions, please let me know what I should talk about next month, and I'll look forward to hearing from you, either from email or in the comments. Shiro out. Bye.